Thank you. So now we are moving to the next presenter from this first section. So here it's Alexander Williams. And some words about Alexander. It's that he grew up in rural Norfolk, where he spent his childhood exploring old farmhouses and abandoned churches. He remembers nothing of his time in boarding school, as he spent all his time in the library with his nose in a book. He was homeless between the age of 17 and 25, and this kept busy during the day by volunteering at in an Oxfam bookstore by night, and he worked where he worked on his first novel, Eternal Youth. Sitting in one McDonald's with the notebook and the pen. He is now a grown man who shares a small cottage with a black and white cat named Wumbi, and stays up every night writing by candlelight. He's diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, and we have to add also that Eternal Youth won the Gold Stake Award for the best vampire novel at the International Vampire Film and Arts Festival in 2020. So, Alexander Williams, now the floor is yours. Let me.
You're muted. Sorry, before I just wanted to say one word, because I invited. Alexander is my guest. We had the pleasure to meet in June at the Vampire Film Festival in Wales. And obviously he's a wonderful writer. Let me just present the title. I don't know if you can see it. Yes, you can see it. So I have this book here. And a wonderful personality as well. So I'm really curious about your talk about the book. Alex won his prize, his Gold Stake Award in 2020, and that was during the pandemics. That's why he got back in 2022 and was holding his golden stakes throughout the whole festival, and we all enjoyed that very much because that was wonderful accent in the festival as well. Alex, if you can unmute yourself because we can't hear you.
Sorry. Hello. I had to leave the pub I was in because they didn't have any plug sockets, so because it was an old pub.
All right, we can see you, we can hear you. So.
I'm in the library, which isn't very. I've no Wi-Fi set up at home yet, so it's not very vampy. Is there a way for me to change my background, Magdalene?
Probably, yes. Let me see. When you have your camera. Where you have your camera.
Yeah.
There is
I've never done this before. I've never done this before.
On the left, where I have it is on the left side at the bottom, and you have the camera icon, and you can open some options, and you have change.
That's brilliant.
Choose video, choose virtual background.
Does that work?
Done. You've done it.
Oh, cool. That's cool. Okay. So yeah, I'm now figuring out age 30, you know, that I was homeless as part of Asperger's syndrome, like because it just doesn't allow you to function like a normal person, and it causes a lot of conflict with individuals. So like with the vampires and the obsessions and things, I'm very strong, but socially very weak. But at the time of being homeless, I was placed, I now know due to my Asperger's, I was placed in a women's shelter. And I was very in tune with what was going on with the women and how they came to be there. And I was reading a lot about the Cromwell Street murders, where Fred and Rose would collect women from a particular bus stop who they knew would always had a suitcase, always traveling to London. And none of the bodies that were found in Fred and Rose's house were ever reported missing, which I found really horrific. And nobody ever reported me missing. And I was sort of, I was in the emergency accommodation safe, but painfully aware that many people aren't, and that they don't get reported missing, they are lost, and each night that they're outside, not inside, they're at risk. And when I looked at a map of the area that Fred and Rose lived, you could see around their house a network of hostels, women's shelters, and it acted like a spider's web with them in the middle. And so I was researching this and decided to write a fiction where different women, it's told from the point of view of different women who, for one reason or another, become homeless and are the candidates for these two particular vampires who know by the scent of depression that these women won't be reported missing for any particular reason. Like they're very careful who they pick, and they steal their life and grow young for another couple of days before reverting back to old age. And it was sort of a book that sort of like having Asperger's, I find it very difficult to communicate with people and to speak about certain things. And also half the world is sort of tuned into the capitalist salary, job, house, mortgage. And it was just my way of saying what I feel I really wanted to say, that the world, the sort of small towns and cities are sort of the shop front, but behind the fronts and the buildings and the leases and the things that sort of the statuses and the jobs, there are people sort of moving through alleys and moving through shelters and always moving. And I was always moving, always in a cafe by day and then in a McDonald's by night, always moving. And it wasn't until I came to stop in the emergency accommodation, because I got very ill one winter, that I realized how exhausted I was from being constantly just on the move to stop any sort of predators catching up or anyone from ever even getting close to me. And even when I'd rent in places, I was always aware that other people were around and noises. And of course, I now know that that's autism. That's perfectly normal to be sort of creeped out by noise. But reading about the Cromwell Street murders, and that was so horrific that I couldn't, it was much worse than anything I could put into fiction. But I was reading a lot of Thomas Harris at the time and thought I'd really like to do something like that. And I wasn't working at the time. I was getting disability for the first time in my life. And I thought I'll spend this year writing a book and get it out of my system. And Rose and Charlie just came as if they'd always been there, really. They were like sort of a product of the music I liked. They're from the 1960s. And so their whole life is about sort of recapturing the 60s and the glamour and the sort of music. But they find that the modern world doesn't quite match up to that. And so they're sort of tragic as the victims in a way, because they're stuck in time and can't move on themselves. But I had no idea that it would be so well received. But I didn't have a computer when I was writing. I just had a typewriter because I was poor. And then once I got a computer after I got housed, I was able to put it up online and just had a massive response from people who had all been through the same thing and had all been all over the world. It said, you know, one woman wrote to me saying that she gave birth in a hostel. And it's just, even now that I live normally with my partner, there's a part of me that preferred the hostel, because it was me sort of being honest about my situation. I didn't have to lie anymore. Like, I was working a lot while homeless and was so aware that after work, everybody went home. Everybody got in their cars and went home, whereas I had to walk to the nearest cafe, and then I would write just to pass the time. It was all about sort of passing time, losing time, because life was unbearable. And I think things were simpler then. And I still find bills and things unbearable. And I now understand that Asperger's are more likely to be homeless because they can't handle pressure indoors. It's not, I think our emphasis on society on homelessness, like the women in the book, were one girl was a runaway, the other one, the relationship had broken down. But I now understand from living it that some people are never well enough to maintain a home all by themselves, and they opt for a homeless existence just to not have the pressure. And I didn't touch on that in the book, and really do want to with another one, like an autistic character. But because I was inside of it at the time, I wasn't able to look at my own situation from the outside and see what the cause was. At the time, I just thought I couldn't hold down a job, and I was just kind of useless. But now I understand that having Asperger's syndrome means that you're always going to struggle with those things, and you need to sort of, like, I had no idea disability even existed. I was brought up in a middle-class home with parents who were very interested in appearances. And in the book, one of the characters, her mother there's a lot of emphasis on appearance, and she's suffering eating disorder in silence because her mother just doesn't see it. And so I had no idea that disability was a thing, that there's help out there, that, you know, I couldn't communicate with anybody, and invalidating environments, and sort of, yeah, it's all in the book. It all went into the book. It was like, yeah, it was like my life, really. And I really miss it. It was having every day where the only thing to think about was the writing was really lovely. And now it's yeah, now I'm housed. It's like I find that I've got to sort of always be thinking about the bills or the next thing. There's not a lot of room for books. But the festival was wonderful, and it was wonderful to meet other people. And but the emphasis on youth and beauty was a lot of fun to play with. But I really wanted to do new vampires that hadn't been done before. I wanted to invent my own, because I was aware that in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, there was a different monster every week, and I thought I'd love to do books where there's a different monster, that there's sort of a link between mental health and other things, that I could talk about the real things using fictional monsters, and vampires are sort of infinite, and there's so much there to use. You can pick and choose. Is that okay, Magdalene?
Absolutely. Not sure if you're asking me about your speech or if you're asking me about the idea. Both. I
wanted to free. I didn't. I kept trying to write a particular speech, and it just didn't work. I'm much better in the moment.
Of course, I know that.
One thing I really enjoyed doing was the artwork, and the self-publishing gave me the option of doing my own covers and my own. Like, I really wanted it to be like nicotine, and finding out that I was good at sort of this more creative stuff was really nice.
Brilliant. So thank you very much for that. It was, as always, very moving, very touching testimony to both your working process and what's happening in your life, and also, as always, the source of very interesting ideas about vampires. So my question is, if I can start, is there a plan to fulfill this promise to yourself? So are you going to continue writing?
I have written another one which needs editing, but I think I stopped writing at the beginning of COVID, and I moved from my social housing in London to Eastern Europe to be with my partner, who you met. But I had some trouble adjusting to the environment there, and then got a bit lost with homophobia and other things, and I couldn't stop being worried about certain things. So now I'm back in England, but I'm hoping to go back over there, because I was able to write because he was supporting me and helping me sort of manage. I now understand that I don't manage very well alone due to autism. But
yes, okay, it's important to have someone to support you.
yeah.
I just to get back to your book, I've just posted a link in the chat to your Amazon website, so you can.
Yes. Have you read any of it, Magda?
I have, indeed. And you have some other people who want to talk to you as well. So thank you very much, because that was really really lovely, and I recommend it to everyone. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here, Alex. Well, the book really is as it said, Florence said in the introduction, it's a best-selling book, and it is quite recent. So get hold of it.
Could I talk about the next one? I wonder if I can do something clever here. One moment. Just give me a second. I really want to do this. This is really good. Hang on. So there is an illustrated edition, and an artist in Austria produced illustrations of it, which was amazing. And that's available direct to me if people really like the story and want something special. It's a hardback illustrated edition. I didn't know I could do this with the video screen, you see.
Oh, hold on a minute.
Otherwise,
I have to make you a co-host. Yes, you can do it now. You can show.
I want to just, yeah. So this is the, I don't know if people can see it. This is the next, the cover art for the next one, which is called the Spider Queen. And it is, yeah, it is, you can see, there we go. It is about so rather than it being two vampires, it's a network of social workers, doctors, police, who all make referrals back to a psychiatrist who's this very large spider who, in human form, who drains sort of happiness and joy out of people. And if you've imagined sort of an entire city where it's the doctor, it's the social worker, it's the policeman, and they all refer teenagers back to this one woman who is sort of at the center of the web. So whereas in the first book, same characters are in the next one, but whereas in the first book it was two vampires who were sort of like stalking kind of aging individuals, this one plays on the idea of a bad network, like a social, like almost like a bad social media sort of, like where when you look at the doctor's surgery, it looks like a normal office, and then when you look again, it's an enormous spider's hollow. But she's actually quite vampiric in how she drains people of all the color. And so with this one, I sort of looked at grays and sort of sucking the color out of everything, really.
It sounds very interesting, and it looks lovely.
Being autistic, I just wanted to say that I'm never sure if I should be in the mental health bracket at all. Wasted a lot of time going to GPs and looking for a solution to a cure, a disease that actually wasn't there at all. It's just that I look at the world differently. And it's amazing how many, like even Virginia Woolf was told that she should stop writing. It was bad for her illness. And I am always in two minds over whether or not I should pursue writing 100%, even if I go homeless, and be happy there, or not write to sort of, because it's only when I'm writing do I feel like I'm really, like my English teacher rang me and said, it's when I read Eternal Youth, it was like I could see how you see the world. And I think it's a bridge to communicate with people, and I don't communicate very well. Often the moment someone is in front of me, Magdalene, you saw, it's almost like I go into I'm not myself at all. It's like I'm always trying to make someone laugh or impress them, and I'm always feeling inferior. a lot of social anxiety. And I think you saw in the festival, it was just a nightmare to be around such creative, talented, whole well minds and souls who could pay their rent with their talent. And then there was me. I'd written the book only because disability had come in to take that burden off me. Because when I was working, I was suicidal. And once I started writing, it was like, oh, I'm not mad or mentally ill, because I wouldn't be able to write a book. So like the way I do it is that I do a bullet point list of the entire story from start to end. And then I cross off as I go. And the descriptions and everything are the sort of feelings that are sort of overwhelming, but the structure is tight because it's, and I learned this from reading Thomas Harris novels over and over, is that his structure is, and Agatha Christie as well, structure is really tight on these novels. They're like like houses built on a very strong foundation. And yet with each chapter, I could be very emotional. And the 24 hours in the day doesn't allow me to be emotional or honest in any way. And so the books act as a way for me to communicate with the world. And you know, I have no friends in real life at all, and yet online I have like 1,000 people who all email and say, when's the next one? And it's very strange living in two worlds. One in England, I'm unemployed and disabled, and I haunt the GP surgeries. And it's like, I mean, my GP, the Spider Queen, is very much based on my GP in London, who was just sick of seeing me. And I didn't know what was wrong with me because I kept losing jobs. And now I understand it's Asperger's syndrome. But the moment I gave up on work and started writing, it all went away. And but I love that vampires for me were always a way to communicate about other things. Like they're the sort of, you can talk about alcoholism, you can talk about mental illness, you can talk about, as long as it's as long as it's a vampire, people are sort of interested, you know. Sorry, too much information.
Thank you. No, thank you very much. There are some questions, I believe. So people are commenting already.
How do I see the comment? Sorry.
Go to chat, but let's start the questions as well.
Alexander, I have a question over here.
Hello.
Thank you very much for your very emotional testimony. It was very touching and important for me to hear it. During your speech, something got in my mind. The way you talked about time, and time looks like a very key concept in your creative process. So I wanted to hear a little bit about your perspective of time and how it's inside your work and your way of perceiving everything.
When I'm writing, I lose time completely, and that's wonderful. Like I commit to losing time, and I let go of time. But when I'm paying rent or I'm paying bills, time becomes something unbearable in terms of this month's bill or this month's. That's also why I think I need to go homeless again to write, because I'm even looking at how much electricity I use in a single day to be home to write, and how much that. But yet in the books, time is something that's stolen from every character, and I think there's a lot of sympathy for the vampires, especially in the books, because they want to stay in the 1960s, and I very much feel like I'm in the wrong time myself, and I'm only happy when I'm outside of time, like the festival, or I'm writing, like when I'm aware of opening times, closing times. Like this morning I got to the pub to attend the conference and they weren't even open yet, and it's like I wish that there was no time at all. And I did make a commitment after finishing the first one to just write and forget about everything else. And then everyone sort of was really backing me up, especially like the readers and the booksellers. And then as money became an issue, because it took 2 years to write the first one and 1 year to edit, and so that's time again, and it's just a nightmare because you actually end up thinking yourself out of doing anything in the end. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it really answered. Thank you very much, Alexander.
Thank you very much. I can see that Peter wants to ask a question as well. Please go.
Yeah. Hi, Alex. Well, a lot of what you said resonated with me. I'm actually disabled myself. I'm visually impaired since birth. I don't know if I've always suspected I've had autism, and my parents told me they've suspected I had autism, but they never bothered to diagnose me. So
Mine too.
For a lot
took
of
me
reasons.
till the late diagnosis always comes with trauma, because people have been living an entire life the hard way with a lot of rejection and pain. And if you look at late diagnosis in adults, the earlier the diagnosis, they have a much better time because they're able to say this is what it is, and there are pathways. But
It's something I'm debating now if I want to get diagnosed, but that's not the. Okay, yeah, thanks. But no, I wanted to, I'm going to read your work.
It's a weight off. It's like people say autism isn't an excuse, but it's certainly an explanation for a lot of things that happen.
Yeah, but I was going to say.
Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, I'm going to read your book because it sounds fascinating. So, like, the talk I'm giving on Sunday is going to be about a disability interpretation of vampires.
Oh well.
I think I only realised it actually while listening to your talk, even though I was already going to give this talk on Sunday, but I think your talk helped me crystallize it properly in my own head for the first time.
It's very hard when you're alone.
I think I've been drawn to the vampire for ages because I somehow connected to disability and being an other, and I think I've only fully, after listening to your talk, grasped that.
Well, Interview with the Vampire, I was always obsessed with the fact that Claudia is trapped in the body of a child, and that this is something that follows her through the book that she cannot overcome. And also in the second one, The Vampire Lestat, I was obsessed with the idea that that there's a rule that Armand says to Lestat that they're not allowed to turn the handicapped. They're not allowed to turn them into vampires. That's forbidden. And of course, Nicholas is turned, who had no hands. And so I was always obsessed with Claudia as an image, because I've always felt trapped in sort of like, I think autistics, we have a high amount of intelligence, but yet we can't, it's like I'm a child at the same time, and you're always wanting to be held by the hand and led through life. Like I couldn't have attended the festival, Magdalene, without my partner bringing me there. Like he has to sort of take me and say, this is the place. And the moment I'm on my own, I just fall to pieces. And that's why always, when I was homeless, I reread Into the Vampire, because the idea that Claudia has to point to what she wants in a shop and Louis has to buy it for her, that I always wanted to overcome that. But each time I've tried, it's been a disaster. Like I moved into my own flat here and didn't have heating for months because I couldn't get the electric switched on. And I was walking all over town looking for an electrician and asking in shops. And then in a hospital, police took me to A&E because someone called the police on me, which is so autistic. And the nurse said, "Have you heard of 24-hour electricians?" Which I hadn't at all. And so disability and vampirism is really fascinating. And if you look at Drusilla in Buffy, that she suffered from intrusive dreams, which as a vampire became heightened. And this idea that the disability can give way to, I think Stephanie Meyer touched on it a little bit in Twilight, where there was one vampire which I really loved named Victoria. I know Twilight's a bit of a bad one, but she was an expert in hiding as a servant because she was beaten in the Victorian era. She was beaten as a servant, and as a vampire, she had this unique ability to find the safe spaces. And there was one line in the book where when she's running from the werewolves, she runs along the line separating the vampires' territory from the werewolves' territory. And Edward described it as her running along the line of a map that she instinctively could run. And my partner is an orienteer, so we often get lost in the woods together with a map and a compass, and we have to find certain points on the map. And that ability, as an autistic, being lost, in a world of buildings and alleys and opening times and closing times, that ability of being able to kind of, I just found that mesmerizing. As an idea, like the idea of disabilities being transformed in vampirism, like that they can become something unique, whereas in life they sort of trap you.
Yeah, very true. I think you've also encouraged me to. I started writing a vampire novel 8 years ago. I abandoned it because my life just went down a completely different right. I just kind of abandoned writing, so might go back to that.
I've abandoned it at the moment, and I think until you can get things quietened down. But one thing I will say is that the moment you commit to sort of writing it down, even on a notebook, it's like, that is what I really think, and it becomes real. And I think getting it out of your head is the most important thing, because in your head it's jumbled up with bills and responsibilities and also how we see ourselves in terms of our age. Like, I'm now age 30, and at 25 it seemed perfectly okay to commit the rest of my life to writing books, and now age 30 it doesn't feel appropriate, even though I'm childless. I just feel that there's a maturity that needs to be acknowledged. And yet, Magdalene, I mean, but then I was always jealous of you, Magdalene, because you can justify the interest along with your academic job, whereas I'm doomed to be the autistic alone in his room. I want to write. And there's this attitude from people around me that Alex isn't conforming as he should and isn't going to work like he should. Even if those jobs always end in failure, and my partner is the only person to say, you really should write because people like it. And this librarian actually here a few weeks ago, I was in here and I was like, and I said, she said, I said, I'm unemployed right now. And she said, but I thought you wrote. And I said, oh, but that doesn't make any money. She said, but it will eventually. And I said, you sound just like my partner. And she went, well, he's right. Where is he? And I was like, I left him because his family didn't like that I wasn't working. And so I thought, I'll come to England and I'll work and prove to everyone. And it's been a total waste of time because I'm just back being rejected. And my partner is like, you really need to come back and write because you are happier. And that's also the paramedics who visited my house said to me, he said, I work 35 hours a week and I support 2 children, Alex. If you write and you're good at it and your partner loves you, then that's what you should do. And I've wasted like 2 years trying to get myself set up to work. And actually I mean, it's that thing of capitalism, money, I think do there's autistics that wrote like Aragon, I think he was 15 and autistic, and his parents encouraged him. And if you don't have that confirmation from somewhere, you get lost in the mire of, I'm 30, I should be working.
Okay, thank you so much, Alex. I'm afraid that we need to finish.
Oh, did I go past my time? Sorry, I didn't realize.
Don't worry. It was all with the consent of the next speaker, so it's all right. But let me just point you to chat, because you have some people commenting on your speech and books, and people have already ordered your book online. So can you see where the chat is?
Yeah, thank you to Magdalene.
Communicate. Thank you so much,
Nilo
Alex,
for giving me the time.
Yeah, but thank you so much for turning up, because we didn't know if Alex is going to make it until the last moment. So I'm very happy that you did, and hopefully you stay with us for some of the conference at least. Thank you very much. And again, let me just show this book, because it's something to definitely look for. Thank you, Alex. Lovely. So let me just, and I apologize for these. No, it's not that bad. It's only a few minutes. But we have the next. Maybe I should apologize for the lack of breaks. We used to have breaks at the very beginning of this schedule, but then people started requesting changes for various reasons, work and so on. So that's how it ended up. I'm sorry. Enrique is absent now, so we can blame him. Let's blame Enrique for that. And in the meantime.